Talking financial organization and a professional practice does not have to be boring. Are you ready for a few money in, money out ideas? It's Susan Gunn coming directly to your head to make you think. Can you handle the truth? Because she is known for being energetic, laughs a lot, and gives honest, sometimes direct, but always practical advice. It's time now for Money In, Money Out.
In light of it being the Christmas season, I had already planned this last podcast to be uplifting and encouragement to give it to those in need and a shorter than normal podcast. Somehow I think you were probably looking forward to that last part. This past week, natural disaster cut through the lives of those that lived in its path. In Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Illinois, Tennessee, with one tornado sustaining rotation for an overestimated 250 miles. All we could do was watch in disbelief. The images and stories were reminiscent of Moore, Oklahoma. My youngest goddaughter and I were hands and feet there in 2013. That EF5 tornado killed 24 people and exploded houses in its 17-mile swath. This one was 250 miles. While we were there doing whatever we could with cleanup and more, we were hearing firsthand the heartbreaking stories. Kentucky is where I wrapped up my college years. In 2 very short years, I learned about the hearts of the Appalachian folks in eastern Kentucky, their willingness to live simply, primarily out of necessity. Growing up in Texas, in the city, finishing my studies in Kentucky was a cross-cultural experience. Statistically, Kentucky is ranked 4th in the 2021 poverty levels at 16.67% of the state being in poverty. Arkansas is closely behind at 16.36%. A large part of Kentucky is rural areas. In western Kentucky, where the tornado hit, Mayfield's median household income is roughly $32,000. Let that sink in. Monette, Arkansas's median household income is $43,000. Dental and medical care is more often paid for an already strained and shallow pocket. They more often have decided between food on the table for their family and any form of annual exam. The resources available to them are scarce in some of these areas. We will hear about these towns because of the devastation, but for every one of the towns that we're hearing about in the news, there is a much smaller, perhaps more impoverished town that is missing the headlines, but not the devastation. Benton, Princeton, Beaver Dam, Cambridge Shores, all said, 19 Kentucky counties were affected by death and or varying degrees of destruction. 19 counties. That's a lot. The people that did not have much to begin with have most probably opened up their homes to strangers who might need food and or shelter. In their communities, they truly look out for one another, and they know each other, and they know each other's business for that matter. Unless, of course, they had a beef with your family going back generations. That's a whole different set of conversations. And yes, it existed. And it probably still does. But I bet in the midst of this heartache, even those family feuds have been laid aside. In college is where I gained firsthand knowledge about the Salvation Army. They were and still are an integral part of Asbury University, where I graduated from. My dad has always talked about how the Salvation Army was such an integral part during World War II, ministering to the needs of soldiers around the world. He talked about how other organizations fell short, often, and truly how he respected and appreciated those in the Salvation Army. Where he was stationed, there was a high suicide rate. Officers in the Salvation Army would come alongside the men who were struggling and walk with them through those tough times, as well as make sure that they received communication from home. I have always been an observer, watching to see if others truly believe what they say they believe, or that their actions follow the words passed their lips. Tongue-in-cheek, in college, they did have some great powder puff football players, those Salvation Army people, who did greatly care about winning, but so did I, so whatever. That's my little shout out to my past football, powder puff football players. But over the 2 years I got to know them, my respect and admiration for them deepened. And that respect is still in place, hadn't gone anywhere. The one thing I know to be absolutely true this past weekend is that Salvation Army were boots on the ground almost immediately following the tornado's destruction. I have no doubt. For someone that has experienced a tornado, there is no organization I would trust more to provide all the services that are needed, including mental and emotional needs. And no one that I would trust more that knows and loves Kentuckians. You may not be able to be hands and feet to help out during this tragedy, but you can give something to help those that can be there. We can always give something, even if it's only $10. There have been many times in my life when $10 was a lot of money. Now it's my responsibility and yours to give what we can. Let me tell you a story about when I learned this valuable lesson of giving. One college Christmas break, I rang a bell for a Salvation Army kettle in North Dallas. Boy, that seems like yesterday. Unfortunately, the weather those weeks were typical Texas, 80 one day, 20 the next. One of those bell-ringing days was a bitter, snowy, cold day with a blustery north wind. But my mitten-wrapped hands kept ringing that bell as my smile greeted all the shoppers rushing past the kettle. And that door was on the north side. I got the full strength of that wind. It was both heartbreaking and frustrating to watch well-clothed shoppers scurry by me at the front door and do everything they could to avoid the Red Kettle. Occasionally, a few would dig into their pockets and bring out a few coins, but the kettle was so light that 20-degree day. Pretty much no one said a thing to me. After all, it was cold. Their goal was to get in the store, get their shopping done, and get home to a nice warm room. I had lots of time to think as they scurried by. It was a heart-changing event. I found myself more amazed as the time wore on at the shoppers' determination to avoid me. I didn't stand in the same place, but walked around trying to engage with them, and quite frankly, to be honest, tried to stay warm. But after time, I felt judged. It was interesting. It was as if they had determined I was a destitute person looking for a handout they were more determined not to give. Eventually, I found myself praying for their hearts to be softened, to see the need around them, and to realize the opportunity they have to make a little go a long way for someone else. It was a life lesson kind of day or week, maybe year, century. Later that cold afternoon, I was getting really tired of ringing the bell with no production. A bundled up young boy, about 7 years old, came to the Red Kettle with an older graying woman, his grandma, and a bulging plastic bag full of coins. His small hands barely cupped around the bulging bag, and he was only a couple of inches taller than the kettle. He stopped, looked at me, then stared at his coins very meekly as he stood by the kettle. Sensing the seriousness of the moment, I knelt down to talk to him. Head down, he spoke slowly. Last year, the only present I got for Christmas was a teddy bear from the Salvation Army. I live with my grandma, and she didn't have any money to get me anything. Head down, he still smiled, and he said, "It was my only present. I love my teddy. he quietly said. He took another breath, head still down, not engaging with me. So, this year, I saved my money to help somebody else be as happy as I was last year. It's not much, but I think it will help somebody else have a present for Christmas. Maybe a teddy bear. He slowly lifted his head, and we looked into each other's eyes, both brimming with tears. He stood on his tiptoes to see over the top of the kettle and carefully put in each coin. I can still hear the sound of each of those coins echoing as they hit the inside of the nearly empty kettle. Quietly, I found the words "thank you" and got a teddy bear-sized hug. We talked for a while in the cold, and it didn't feel cold. And his grandma was beaming from ear to ear as she told me how diligently he truly had saved all year. He talked incessantly about what other kids might get because he was helping. And he talked more about going to the Red Kettle than to going to Santa Claus. I felt honored. We were standing in the freezing weather, but all I felt was a warm heart. That was the best gift I got that year. And I got to tell you, I still thank him. It amazes me to think he would be over 40 years now. And I pray that his heart is still thinking of others, giving what he can. He may not even remember how he changed my life that cold day, but I will never forget his eyes, nor his heart. Every year now, I make a run to the bank to get my kettle money. I made a commitment that cold day to never pass a kettle without putting something in. Not coins, but paper. It is an intentional act, and I always talk to the kettle ringer, thanking them for enduring our ever-changing weather conditions to bring happiness to someone else. It is returned because most of the time when I leave the store, they seek me out, meet my eyes, and thank me with a smile. I am thankful and grateful. I have so much, and I could never give enough. See, that day, a young man taught me how to give from the abundance of my heart, to give all I can, to never hold back. So, let me ring a bell again. In the midst of this past week's tragedy, to help this season of giving, I would like to challenge you. How about give another teddy bear to Young Arms? Be prepared. Go get your kettle money. And if you're like me, you can probably tell I've been a little sick with bronchitis. And I still wanted to record this in the midst of short breath. But if you've been like me and you've been ordering from Amazon, then go online. I'll provide links. You can give online. The next Salvation Army kettle bell ringer you see, stop, look at them, talk to them, thank them for making a difference, and put something in. In fact, I'll put those links to the Salvation Army and the Team Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund created by Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Often it's not the one being given to that is blessed the most, but the giver themselves. More than likely, you'll never see the results of your giving. All these years later, I still wonder about that young boy. Well, that's okay, because the need is great, and you can still make a difference. They need all the help you can give. Some of you may be able to be hands and feet on the ground. If you can, contact an organization like Salvation Army. Just as it happened in Moore, Oklahoma, there will be an overseeing volunteer organization in each town affected. In fact, the Kentucky State Police has created a number for those that want to volunteer. All they have to do is call. The Kentucky Division of Emergency Management has directed volunteers to fill out a survey on their website. I'll post the link for that too. And Appalachians for Appalachian created a spreadsheet. This is awesome. That's being updated for what's needed and how to give. I'll post that link as well. The governor, Andy Beshear, said the Kentucky State Parks will be open and they need volunteers to staff the parks and to help with menial tasks, which are so great, but huge tasks like washing dishes and clothes. I'll post those links as well. There are many ways you can help, regardless of your proximity to the affected areas. Hold out hope to those who have had so much ripped from their lives. They didn't plan on this. Many were struggling to get by as it was, but now life's landscape is forever changed for them. I've seen this kind of devastation personally. It will take them years to recover. And it will take all of us to help. Somewhere I've heard it said, to whom much is given, much will be required. Now is your time to step up. And that will be a great way to walk this year out into the hope of 2022. So until then, continue to lead out the remaining of this year with integrity. And Merry Christmas.
That's a wrap for this podcast of Money In, Money Out. Thanks for listening. Be sure to write down the most valuable tip you learned today so you don't forget it. And remember, you can find out more about all the valuable books and services Susan has to offer at www.susangunsolutions.com.